Hello, good morning. Welcome to this week's Learn with Lorna, episode number 234. My name is Lorna Steele-McGinn. I'm the Community Engagement Officer with the Highland Archive Service, and we have 4 archive centres in the Highlands of Scotland in Inverness, Fort William, Portree and Wick, where we look after a whole range of historic documents relating to this part of the world. And as you've guessed from the fact that it's episode 234, if you've seen any of the others, you'll know that it is indeed a very broad range of documents. This series is brought to you by High Life Highland at no cost to the viewer. High Life Highland is a charity registered in Scotland, and there's no payment or subscription required to take part in this series. But if you're able to donate towards our work, then we're very, very grateful for that. So thank you for your feedback from last week. It was so lovely to hear from some midwives who had watched the episode and had been really interested to find out about some of the records we hold. So that's all we really appreciated when you know that it's reaching people who work still in that profession. This episode, number 234, we are revisiting a collection that I last looked at in depth back in August 2021 in episode 74, the wonderful Baillie of Dunain collection D456 held at the Highland Archive Centre in Inverness. It's a large collection. It dates from about 1700 to 1850 and it's split into 3 sections. Section A is the Baillies of Dunain family and estate papers. Section B is Inverness fencibles, and Section 3 the MacDonnells of Glengarry, and it's believed to have been brought together by the famous Charles Fraser Mackintosh, who was factor for the Baillies. We're going to be looking today at Section D456/A, papers relating to the Baillie family and their estates. There are so many stories to be told from this collection, much like the Fraser Tytler papers a few weeks ago. The Baillies were prominent both in local affairs in and around Inverness, but also very heavily and prominently involved in the East India Company and in the military, so some very notable people within the family. It's a really interesting collection with documents spanning hundreds of years and thousands of miles. Last time I told stories of 2 specific individuals from within this collection, both William Baillies. One who had led a brigade column of the East India Company into battle against the Mysore army led by Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan at the Battle of Pollilur in 1780. He was captured and died in captivity at Seringapatam. I knew I was going to screw that up. At Seringapatam. His story and the events that surround his life have remained a source of fascination for historians ever since. And the other person I looked at in episode 74 was the other William Baillie. It was his nephew, who, like his father and his uncle, left the Highlands for India, setting sail in February 1811 and going on from what was Bombay at the time to Baghdad, before developing a mental infirmity and coming home to remain under the care of specialist physicians for the remainder of his life. I'm going to come back to him at the end of this episode, but also I think I'll do a full episode on his story because it's really, really interesting. But for this episode, I thought I would share some of the individual standalone examples from this collection that should hopefully really illustrate aspects of this family both at home and abroad. So I'm going to start at home. The Baillies held land in Dunain, Dochfor, Turbrek and Lays, all in and around Inverness, given to them after distinguished service at the Battle of Brechin in 1442, and one branch still retains Dochfor today. But the line we're looking at here held the estate of Dunain, about 13 miles southwest of Inverness, and also due to the 1780s marriage of Colonel John Baillie to Isabella Campbell of Budgate, held lands in Budgate near Cawdor. She's an absolutely fascinating character as well. I'm definitely going to do a Learn with Lorna on Isabella Baillie. I think she is fascinating, for want of another word, but we'll come back to her another time. So let's look at some of the documents that refer to the business of running those estates. We hold various rent rolls for the estates, and they are very useful for finding out the names of people who lived on particular pieces of land, but they also really give really great insights into social history. So for instance, the 1793 rent roll for Dunain estate tells us, amongst multiple other things, that the Pinnacle of Dunain is tenanted by Hugh McLean, who pays his rent in £6 worth of money, 6 hens, 12 and 12 shillings. He pays his rent in £6 money, 6 hens, 12 shillings worth of dry matter, and he contributes 1 shilling and sixpence to the running of the mill. So you really get an idea of how these things were happening in practice. Everybody's not paying their rent in money, they're paying in bits and pieces and in kind. We can see from this document that the river fishings are leased in 1793 by the Aberdeen Fishing Company, and that John Taylor rents Balmafettic for a total of £3 7 shillings and 3 hens. William Ross has Balnacroik for £2 and 2 hens. The column headings also reference wedders, so sheep, peats, and various other things. So it's really good for getting a glimpse into the practicalities of tenantry and running an estate. We hold a really interesting document from 1808, which is a statement of the contents and valuation of Budgate, Ballagan, Cottertown, Clunas, and many other various parts of land that are within the possession of Mrs. Baillie. And for each property, it's broken down into a valuation of that piece of land's arable ground, its pasture, and its moor. So for instance, Budgate has 11 components as well as the buildings and the gardens. Each is clearly delineated. So for instance, the green, the pasture lying west of the houses, the land east below the road, the poor pasture along the march with Kilrock. And the financial details of each are followed by some written information, such as this. So this is written after a few pages of financial information about the bits of land. The above, the preceding, and the opposite pages contain the lands of Budgate in the possession of Mrs. Baillie, comprehending Budgate, Ballantor, Ballagan, and Cottertown, agreeable to the different schedules thereof. The value of the whole is £91 10 and 9p, exclusive of the lands of Clunas upon the 8th page. The soil of this farm in general is light and much encumbered with small stones. Some of the fields below the bank is very fine land. The whole of it most improvable, fine grass and turnip land if put into any kind of order. Little or nothing has been done here in the way of improvement of the fields, unless a few trifling enclosures near the house. But the old feudal system carried on by subsetting to a number of poor tenants who are generally oppressed both with rent customs and services. So he's saying that they're allowed to subset or sublet out to tenants. A good dwelling house and garden is upon the premises, but the offices are ruinous and tumbling down. A sum not exceeding £300 sterling should therefore be allowed to Mrs. Baillie towards building offices upon a regular plan with a slate roof and walls thorough built with lime. The plan is to be approved of by the proprietor. This may be considered, which it is, a high sum for some offices, but I consider that it is likely that this place may always be the residence of some connection of the family or factor, and it is right to have substantial and proper buildings. So that's the value for the properties on pages 1 to 3. There are another 5 pages covering Clunas and different areas. So it's the same question as always. It really depends what information you want out of a collection as to what answers you come across. If you're particularly interested in land management, in how you invest in that, how people invested in the estates in the late 1700s and early 1800s, then that sort of document is absolutely what you want to be looking at. That valuer describes it as a beautiful place, deserving of a small house and a neat small court of offices. We of course hold a lot of correspondence for this family, and let's have a look at some letters relating to the family's life at home in Scotland. Some of these cover large and important subjects, and some of them are very trivial. But by looking at the correspondence, we can really get a glimpse of life within the house. So, a letter written by Margaret Fraser at Dunain to Miss Baillie states, presumably discipline might not have been necessary or difficult to maintain previously, but, she says, anyone acting for you requires support, and I feel convinced from experience that nothing short of rigid systems will do in an establishment of this kind. In my opinion, it will ensure its stability and will give you less anxiety, whoever its inmates may be. The laws of this house should be like those of the Medes and the Persians, unalterable. I should propose that the servants commence work at 5:30 in summer and at 6 in the winter, that all fires and lights be extinguished by 10 p.m. No one permitted to enter the house nor go out of it after that hour, on penalty of being turned away, and neither the keeper nor the servants to entertain visitors without the assent of the person having the household charge. Mr. Bailey's breakfast hour should be at 8 o'clock in summer, dinner at 2:30, and servants' tea at 6:30, and the keeper should conform to these hours without excuse and should have no control with regard to these things. And I don't know what her relationship was to the family, but you get the feeling that she's no messing about anyway. But the letters obviously also give insight into the comings and goings and activities of the family members and their friends, as well as giving details about family members. So let's look at some examples of those. The first one I want to share with you was written by a Miss G. Grant from Coddermance to Miss Bailey. And she says, Coddermance, July 22nd, 1811. I'm afraid my dear Anne, she's writing to Anne Bailey, my dear Anne will almost think by this time that I have quite forgotten that there is such a person living as Anne Bailey, but I can assure you that you are much mistaken if you ever thought so. Although I happen not to have written to you ere now, depend upon it, it was not altogether owing to neglectfulness of you. Indeed, I expected to have had the pleasure from hearing from you before this time. However, I was always happy to hear of you from Budgate, and was glad to find that you were so well pleased with your situation, and likewise that you were getting rid of your thaw, which was never much observed. At the same time, it is as well to have none of it when one has an opportunity of getting it cured. Now, I think when I looked that up in the Dictionary of Scots Language, your thaw, I think, is like a twist or a turn, so like being thrawn in personality. I think it looks like a sprain, something like that. So she says it's good that you've got the chance of getting that sorted. She goes on to say, I wish I was as near Dr. Chisholm as you are at present, and I would make him look at my handsome shoulder, which I'm sorry to say is no better than or worse than when I last saw you. I'm certain that you'll be much rejoiced at seeing Mr. and Mrs. Davidson Cantray. I wish poor little Davy may receive benefit from their jaunt. I take the advantage of sending this letter enclosed in a box that your mother is to send you by them. I've had the pleasure of being pretty often at Kilrock for some little time past. Indeed, I am particularly obliged to your sister for her attentions to me. She is always very kind. I was at Inverness a day with her, and another at Fort George. We went down to hear the 7th band of music, I wonder if that's 78th band of music, play, accompanied by Miss Mackintosh Nairn, Mr. Rose, and the children. We spent a few hours very agreeably there. The latter part of our company, the children, behaved astonishingly well, and were not the least frightened by seeing so many military, which was rather surprising, especially Isabella, as she's so timid at any rate. Hugh is the same brave little fellow as ever. Johnny, I think it's Johnny, is a beautiful boy, and Elizabeth is a very fine and stout child. I think she's like Hugh. I dare say you long much to see them all, particularly the young one, as you've never seen her. I hope that time will soon come when we shall all have the good fortune to have you amongst us once more. I don't think your mother is quite determined as yet whether to allow you to come home with Mrs. Davidson or not. I hope she will if you wish for it for yourself, as it would be such a good opportunity. However, she has some time to think of it, for I am told it's probable they will make a 3 months' visit of it. You'd be glad to hear that there has been good accounts of your brother from the Madeiras. I trust he will soon arrive there safe, where there is no fear that he will do well if blessed with good health. Now, unfortunately, he would go on to die not long after that. Few days pass when I don't see Archie. He is a good deal stouter than when you saw him, and I hope rather better in every respect. He is much better for Mr. Quinn's good company. I have been 3 or 4 months at Inverness this last spring, with a Miss Fleming, boarding mistress, but I never passed such an unhappy time in my life. There were 2 cousins of mine and myself that went at the same time. We were the first boarders she got. Hannah Fraser and another young girl came soon after. We were very ill used. Sometimes we did not get half meat, and that of the worst kind. The poor creature, she did not long enjoy this world after that. Our quarter was not expired when she took her departure out of this wicked world. It was altogether very disagreeable for us all. I remained in town for some weeks after her death. And she goes on to say that she's attended a concert with Mr. Thompson and she's been playing a piece of music at it, but she adds, I think it's time for me to be giving over playing in public places. I'm afraid I'll not be at another concert as one of Mr. Thompson's scholars. But I wish it was not, for I never tire of being with him. I also enjoyed this one from Jane Stevenson, written from Edinburgh in 1840 to Miss Baillie. And I think even in the way that these people refer to, so they're writing to Anne Baillie and they're referring to her mother, you really get a sense of Isabella and that strong personality. You know, I do hope your mother will allow you to come home, but we'll see what she decides. So that one was 1811. This one is 1840, written by Jane Stevenson from Edinburgh. And here are some bits from it. She says, we are all well. I wish you had been in town this winter. It has been very gay. Balls, assemblies, concerts, etc. are talked of as the common everyday occurrence. But for my part, I have declined the honour of attending any public resorts. I prefer myself private balls at present. A young lady does not acquire a taste for the more fashionable parties until she obtains the age of around 17 or 18. In your last letter, you asked me for some news of Mrs. Simpson. I have heard nothing further than that there have been some proceedings against them. But I believe a final divorce has not yet been obtained. It's obviously the chat of the town. Mr. Borthwick, I believe, has visited her several times, and they have been seen walking together. And that has rather a fair appearance. Perhaps the flame may yet be kindled, and the divorce may be set aside. She was a fool for her own sake, for Mr. Borthwick married her only for her money. It ought to be an example to unmarried people to beware. For my own part, I am going to be very circumspect when my courting days commence. I will expect to hear from you very soon. I suppose you will have hills and dales aplenty in the Highlands, and I will expect a lively description of Scotia's scenery when you return, for my head has its full share of the romantic, and I am not very sure but that its handsome young chieftains may please me better than all its craggy mountains. I love that idea that tell me about the scenery, but mostly tell me about the men. It makes me laugh how many of these letters open with protracted apologies for having not been in touch sooner. It's all very familiar that you'll think that I've forgotten you even existed. I'm so sorry for not getting in touch. I've been really busy. It just all feels so current. I feel like I start most messages to people going, I'm really sorry I haven't been in touch before now, but some things don't change. So much for a glimpse into the society the family moved in at home and the sort of things they were doing, attending balls and parties and so on. But I mentioned at the beginning how heavily involved the Baillies of Dunain were in the East India Company and in events in India generally. This letter illustrates this. This was written by John Baillie in 1772 from India. He's the brother of William Baillie I mentioned at the beginning at the Battle of Pollilure. So he says, Dear Mother, although I have not heard from you since my arrival in this country, yet I do not suppose that you have in the least forgotten me. At the same time, I do own that your writing would be of particular satisfaction. So again, please get in touch with me. My brother has wrote several letters by the ship and has sent the power of attorney to Dr. Aves and Mr. Campbell to act for him. I dare say that they are the persons that you would choose were you to appoint them yourself. He has notwithstanding desired them to always act with your approbation. As to his own going home, it is at present impossible, except he was to throw away that opportunity which he has been labouring towards for these 13 years past. He has lived with General Smith these 4 or 5 months, and had double pay as brigade major. Besides, he is now close upon a majority. That being the case, I'm sure that you will not be surprised at his staying a little longer in this country. As for me, I am still the ensign, but I expect to step up in a few weeks. I believe I might even say days. During the expedition against Tanjore, I had double pay, and if the army was to take the field, I think I could be pretty sure of the same again, perhaps better. The only news is the siege of Tanjore, and that my brother has given a short account of that to the doctor. Remember me to all my friends, and believe me, my dear mother, your ever affectionate son and servant, John Baillie. So again, just that writing home and saying, obviously he's here, what he's doing in India, but also the fact that his brother is there and what's happening with them. So you get a sense of just how invested the family are in India. And another member of the family, so there was those two brothers, but another member of the family who found his way to India was Francis Baillie, who wrote in a letter from London, dated the 5th of January 1774, he describes to Mrs. Baillie his journey to get from Inverness to London. He would then go on in a couple of days later, or a couple of weeks later, to leave for India. And we have letters in the collections from that journey to Gravesend to London, but then also from Madeira, from Cape of Good Hope, and eventually from India. This months-long journey to get to India didn't start very well, as this letter records. Dear Madam, these few lines serve to acquaint you of my safe arrival in this great metropolis. So he's writing from London. In perfect health on Saturday last by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, being the first day of the new year. We sailed from Keswick on the Monday afternoon, and that night got down to Fort George, and on the Tuesday morning to Cromarty, where we remained all day until Wednesday night, all the time of which I was ashore. Then on the Wednesday night, with a contrary wind, we proceeded forwards on our voyage, but the wind still continuing against us, though not high, would not allow us to come at any speed. So with contrary winds and calms, it was Tuesday night before we made Peterhead, which was 9 days from Inverness, and all of which time I was so sick that I should have given absolutely anything to be ashore. And I did not eat a mouthful of anything in all that time, except some brochen, some porridge, which I drank, which I believe was the sweetest ever went down my throat, although I am quite sure that it was the worst and the dirtiest that I ever sipped. We've all been in that place when you're ill and you're just like, this probably isn't the best thing to eat, but it feels like the only thing I can deal with. Then, on the Tuesday night at Peterhead, the wind became favourable, and so from there we had such a fine gale that brought us to Gravesend on the Friday afternoon, where we stayed all night, and from there next day to London. When this wind turned for us, I got quite well, and still continues so, with a clean stomach and a good appetite 3 times a day. I lodged with Betty and Sarah Munro since Monday. I only saw Mr. Mitchell this day. He is a very discreet gentleman as ever I knew, and says he will do all for me that he can. He wrote to Dr. Aves with the tale of the box. Don't know what that is. I called on the other gentlemen, but did not find them within. I will write all my friends more as soon as I know how matters are likely to go on. I remain wishing you and all friends a good new year. I am always sensible of your motherly kindness towards me. Now Francis, I believe, would also go on to die in India, just as William did. John would die in the service of the East India Company in Ireland, and the other William, the younger William, would also suffer for his connection to the East India Company. I think Francis died at the Battle of Porto Novo on the 1st of July 1781. And that relationship that the family had with the East India Company and with India took its toll on the family through death, through illness, through loss, with multiple members dying. I always want to qualify that by saying by recognising the very negative impact that the East India Company had in India as well. But I think it can be seen through this final document that I want to share with you, just the toll that this relationship with the East India Company took on this one particular family. This is written by Isabella. So Isabella was the widow of John, the sister-in-law of the older William, and the mother of the younger William. And she writes, "To the Honourable the Court of Directors of the Honourable East India Company. Gentlemen, I beg leave humbly to address your Honourable Court on behalf of my son, Mr. William Baillie, writer in the Honourable Company's Bombay establishment, who, having discovered a predilection for the Honourable Company's service, was highly and very expensively educated accordingly, and he proceeded to India as writer in the year 1811. This predilection was owing to his father, the late Colonel John Baillie, having so long served in India, and more particularly his uncle, Colonel William Baillie, whose life was sacrificed to the service of the Honourable Company, and whose services and sufferings must be well known to many of the Honourable Directors. The premature death of both of these gentlemen has proved to the family a loss irreparable, and has left the paternal estate exceedingly embarrassed. It now becomes my painful duty to state that although my son left this country for India with a bodily and mental constitution equal to that of any of his relatives who have had the honour of holding such distinguished situations, both civil and military, in the Honourable Company's service, he returned to this country in 1814 in a deplorable state of mental health, amounting, I fear, to absolute mental derangement, the particulars of which will be more fully submitted to the Honourable Court by Dr. Rees of London, under whose charge he now remains. For some time after my son's arrival in India, I had the most flattering accounts of his indefatigable application to his duties, which was confirmed by his being appointed to a situation at Baghdad, and one eventually most promising. And from every information that I have yet been able to obtain, it was in the zealous discharge of his duties at this station, during an unusually hot season, that he was attacked for the first time with his present malady. By a letter I had from him dated 10th of January 1813, he appears to have recovered so far after returning to the presidency as to have received the highly respectable appointment of Acting Collector General of Bombay, but he was finally obliged to be embarked by his friends in the deplorable state in which he now unfortunately continues. I have requested of Thomas Gillane, Esquire of Inverness, who has had the entire management of the family property for many years, to make out a statement of its actual situation, which I take the liberty of annexing and submitting to your Honourable Court, and by which it will appear that my unfortunate son, having in the discharge of his duties in India been rendered incapable of further service, either for the Honourable Company or for himself, has no resource. But in the consideration which his own services and sufferings, as well as the service and sufferings of his uncle Colonel Baillie and other relatives, may obtain from the liberality and justice of your Honourable Court, I therefore beg humbly to solicit that the Honourable Court may be pleased to grant an allowance to their unfortunate servant, Mr. William Baillie, of £300 per annum, or any such provision that the Court may consider adequate for his maintenance." It's quite a persuasive letter to say, my husband has died prematurely after years of service with your company, my brother-in-law has died in the service of the East India Company, other family members have, and now my son has gone, inspired by all of these stories, has gone and been afflicted. And now the estate, with the loss of all of these men in quick succession, means that we have no money and we have nothing, and can you support us? And William Baillie would never fully recover, and he was the last of the Baillie of Dunain line, and on his grave it says that he is the last of this great line. And I've maybe mentioned before that in his obituary it says that although he's died this year, he's been lost to society for decades before. But we'll come back to William Baillie at a specific Learn with Lorna in the new year. In the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed hearing a little bit more about this collection and some of the people within it. As I said, it's another family which is very prominent both in local affairs, but also a really strong connection to India and elsewhere. So I hope you enjoyed hearing a bit more about it. Thank you for your comment, Michael, that you really like the excerpts and extracts that I use. I'm really glad. As you can imagine, when you're dealing with thousands and thousands of documents, it's always a challenge to work out which ones to share and which ones will illustrate your point. So thank you for joining me. I hope you can join me next week. I will be looking at the story of the Mulbui murderer. So I hope you can join me for that next week. A reminder that this series is brought to you by High Life Highland at no cost to the viewer. That High Life Highland is a charity registered in Scotland, and there's no payment or subscription required to take part in this series. But if you're able to donate towards our work, then we really very much appreciate that. Thank you for all your lovely comments coming in. I can't tell you how much it lifts my heart. Thank you.